Good evening, everyone. My name is Omar Zobi. I will be supporting from the technical side of the session here. And thank you for joining Abu Dhabi University HR Enrichment Certificate webinar. I will just give you a quick brief about the agenda today. I will just give you a quick briefing about how the webinar will go today. As you've seen here on the option on Zoom, you will have the camera and you will be off. The mic, there is an option raise hand in case you will be, if you have any doubt, if you have any, you need to participate or you need to ask a question. You can click on the raise hand button and we will allow you to talk. But we suggest all your query and question to be left to the end of the meeting, and Dr. Hiba will assist you on that. And also you have a Q&A session. You can also here, you can leave your question and it will be, all the question will be answered by Dr. Hiba end of the meeting. Uh, Also, you can just the chat also available if you have any um, if you need to participate. My mic doesn't work. If I need to answer, can you? Okay, if your mic doesn't work, hopefully if you will be able to fix it. If not, you have the Q&A. Um, Q&A. You can click on it and you can leave your question there, and Dr. Hiba she will be answering all the question later on. Yes, you can type. You can type, and we will also reply to you on the Q&A dialogue. So from beginning, as you see here on the screen, uh, uh, everyone can see my screen shared, right? Can you just write for me on the chat to make sure everyone can see my screen? Yes, great. We have more than 120 so far participants. Happy to see all of this number joining. So, uh, so first, you can go here. As you see, you can scan the QR code here, or you can go to community.edu.ac.ae. You have to register with your username and password if you haven't registered before, if you haven't attended with us before. So you can register with your account. To register in Edu community portal to access the recording, reading materials. All the reading materials will be uploaded on the community.edu.ac.ae. All the discussion has been will be during the webinar will be there also. Also to get your certificate and of the modules. So you can go directly from the browser, type community.edu.ac.ae, or you can scan the QR. To get the certificate, all of you may be wondering about the certificate. You need to attend and participate in all modules. So if you attend the whole module, the 6 modules, you will get the complete certificate. If you attend only few modules, you will be getting only attendance certificate. So there is 2 different certificates. So I'm encouraging everyone to attend the 6 modules. So I will just right now leave the mic to Dr. Hiba. Dr. Hiba, the floor is yours.
Thank
You
you.
can
Thank you,
start.
Omar. Thank you, Omar, for the introduction. And welcome everybody to our first module in ADU's HR enrichment training. And as Omar suggested, hopefully you will get the chance to attend all the remaining modules so as to get the full certificate for the HR enrichment training. It's really great to have you all here with us today. Just allow me 1 second to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, doctor, we can see your screen.
Okay, I'll
If
just share
you
my
can't just
screen.
play the presentation, yes.
Yes. Okay. So today we are starting our HR analytics training. This is the outline of our training. This training is intended for people who are interested to learn about HR analytics, maybe don't know exactly what HR analytics are, what's involved in people analytics, or how these can be used in the context of HR, or for people who are aware of HR analytics, they know they are important, they give very valuable insights, but they would like to see how HR analytics and people analytics can improve different HR processes and how these can be implemented in the workplace. So for both group of attendees, we will offer, first of all, a nice introduction to people analytics, and then we'll move into covering how people analytics can help different HR processes, such as staffing, for example, performance, moving into collaboration, and then we'll end up with different types of people analytics, addressing mental health analytics and well-being analytics. So just to get started, let's have a nice introduction about people analytics. Speaking about people analytics, what do you mean by people analytics, and why there is high demand in people analytics, and what are the things involved in people analytics? Is there a process that we need to follow, or we can just apply statistical analysis and that will do? All of these what's and whys will be covered in our first section of this presentation. First of all, we all agree that there is a growing demand on people analytics, and that's why all of you are here today. All of you are HR professionals, all of you are HR executives. And if you don't appreciate people analytics, you wouldn't have expressed interest in this training. So you all really appreciate the importance of people analytics, and you can recognize that there is a growing demand, and companies are striving to really implement analytics to improve their all the kind of processes. And that's why we need to learn more about analytics. So why there is this growing demand on people analytics? Basically because we do have huge amount of data, and there are many requirements on HR professionals to offer exceptionally well-informed recommendations and exceptionally well-informed decisions. So referring to Siska's book related to people analytics, it was mentioned that at a time when data are more readily available than ever, HR is being asked for more information, better insights, and more precise recommendations to help executives and managers run their businesses. So we have more requirements put on HR professionals, more requirements put in on HR executives to support other executives in their organizations. And with this growing demand for smarter recommendations and insightful information, we really need some extra support. We need some tools and mechanisms that give us better insights into our business ongoing. Looking at these survey results then reported by the US Pulse, they were asking leaders and including chief human resource officers about how much they would invest, or what would be the the direction, what would be the direction in which they would invest the most concerning the digital transformation in their organization. And if you can see here, it at the top, most of the participants or the respondents to this survey, they replied that they would really invest in optimizing their approaches to data analytics across the business. And if that would tell us anything, it would tell us how important investing in people analytics is, and how valuable the payoffs are of people and human resource analytics. Also, if we look at Google Trends, considering how frequently people search for these two terms, for HR and people analytics, starting from 2010 up to 2020, up to this year, you can see the exponential growth in people interest in people analytics and HR analytics. And Google actually gives a nice representation of different trends, because if people are interested in a topic, the first thing they would do, they would go and Google it. If you ask a question, they would come and tell you, Google it, go and Google it. So tracking the search queries of people on Google as a search engine gives an indication of different trends out there. And we can see that the HR and people analytics, it's actually a growing trend over time. Um, what about organizations? What about the very well-known organizations? Are they really implementing people analytics? Are they really putting this in practice? Well, actually, up to 2016, IBM reported a 40% increase in the use of people analytics in their organization. MIT research revealed that it was found that people analytics is considered as a major competitive advantage for companies. So, if we know how to implement people analytics properly in our organization, and then we know how to better manage our people, then that would lead to better performance and eventually more revenues, giving us a competitive advantage compared with other competitors in the field. Another study by the Society of Human Resource Management, conducted back in 2016, found that 79% of organizations, relatively large organizations with around 10,000 employees, they now have data analysis roles in their HR department. So it's no longer a role only specific to the IT people, or it's in the research team. No, now they already have a data analyst job or data scientist job within the HR team. Um, these are just examples of how people analytics and HR analytics are attracting a growing attention over time, and they're becoming indeed on high demand, and people are really striving to implement these analytics in their organization. Why? If we're thinking why organizations are really striving to implement efficient and effective people analytics in the organization, the first answer that comes to any one of us is that because people are the most important asset. An organization cannot be good without good employees. So if we are thinking, for example, about university, we are offering quality education, we are offering interesting research experience, then how can we do this without good faculty members? How can we do this without a very effective and efficient team, support team? Our people actually create our success, because our people are the ones conducting the core business activities and achieving our strategic goals. So if we're not able to well manage our employees and make sure that we are hiring the right people, putting them in the right place, evaluating the performance properly, and then managing them properly, we cannot ensure really that as an organization we are achieving any strategic objectives. Okay, I can see that you are typing in the chat some questions. I will attend to these questions at the end of each section of our presentation. The other reason why we really have uh, people analytics are becoming really very important and on very high demand is that we have all the enabling technologies nowadays, and no one can deny the fact that we have huge amounts of data. We have big data, and you are hearing this all the time: big data, big data. It's not only about the size of data. It's not that we have huge databases, for example, or servers containing a huge amount of log files tracking people's activities in the system, in the computerized system. It's not just about quantity, it's not only about volume, but it's also about the variety of data. We do have classical data collected through ERP systems about employees' personal information, name, age, profession, years of experience, tenure, and all these kind of information that we usually collect in a typical ERP system. But we also have access to other types of data. We have access to email communications, to chats, to interaction, to meeting frequencies, to activities on the system, all kind of activities which can give valuable insights into analytics, into the analytics model. So nowadays we have the largest databases with the most diverse data ever, that is in hand, accessible. We can, it's easily accessible, we can use it easily. This data requires, of course, huge computational power. It requires very special processors and computers, which we already have nowadays. And then if we can access data, if we can collect this interesting data, and we know we have the devices required to process it, we really need some algorithms in place that would allow us to really infer these interesting insights from data. And we do have a lot of machine learning, deep learning algorithms that allow us to really come up with very interesting and valuable advices, insights from these data. Also, there is a growing demand, or not just, sorry, the demand. There is um, uh, we appreciate nowadays that just by relying on classical data and classical statistical analysis, we might not always be able to really uncover hidden information, or look deep into some hidden patterns in our data. So because we have a lot of noisy data, we have a lot of data collected by chance, or maybe inaccurate data, or we have overestimations or underestimations. So there are a lot of biases in the data that might not always give me the kind of information I need to make informed decision. And therefore, I need some models that are capable um, of factoring out noise, considering recurring patterns, interesting patterns that indeed indicate, or lead to some valuable insights into the data that would eventually inform our decision making process. So we've been saying analytics, analytics, analytics from the beginning of the session. I refer to people analytics. We are aiming to implement analytics models. We need to infer insights from analytical models. So what do you mean by analytics, and how analytics are different from classical statistical analysis? Analytics can be defined as the systematic computational analysis of data, or statistics. It's a process through which we try really to um, uh, analyze a huge amount of data, try to implement statistical methods, maybe combine multiple statistical methods, not just one, with the ultimate objective of revealing some kind of associations in the data, looking for some meaningful patterns, and that's the most important keyword when speaking about analytics patterns. We are looking for patterns. We are no longer really considering isolated incidents or distinct events, things that happens once or twice. Rather, we are looking deeper. We are looking at recurring patterns. We are looking at consistent patterns, things that can actually happen frequently over time. That would tell me like, okay, yeah, this is the actual performance of my employee, or indeed this is the qualification of my candidates. Based on these patterns, I can then make will-informed decisions, more accurate decisions. How can we infer these patterns again using machine learning algorithms? A branch of AI, a branch of artificial intelligence, with the ultimate objective of making an effective decision. We would like to have informed decisions. That was analytics in general. So, what about people analytics specifically? Same. However, we are applying all of this in the context of HR. So we are doing this systematic computational analysis of data. We are trying to infer some interesting patterns, recurring and consistent patterns that are meaningful and that can guide the decision making process, but in the context of HR specifically. So we are specifically using people related data, performance related data, for example, qualification data, sales information, number of accidents, number of team members, number of collaborators, things that are relevant to the context of HR. But it more or less follows the same steps, and it applies more or less the same algorithms and the same technique within the context of HR. Okay, what can we do with these analytics? If these are really interesting analytics, there is very high demand in analytics, and there are a lot of requirements put on HR professionals to make better decisions and more well-informed decisions, then what can we do with people analytics? Can people analytics guide the hiring process? Can people analytics guide performance evaluation? What can we do with people analytics, with these interesting analytics and really valuable analytics? According to Ian, who's a managing director of workforce analytics in JP Morgan, he mentioned that if we can get incrementally better at making people related decisions with data, if we can increase the likelihood of putting the right people in the right roles and the right price point with the right team and leadership, we think we can help the organization be better at a global scale and help deliver profitable growth. What this statement tells us, from an HR analytics professional, he's the managing director of HR analytics in one of the major companies, top companies, is that basically people analytics can help with everything, with every single process that any HR professional is expected to conduct. So what does people analytics cover? Basically everything. It covers hiring, it covers retention, attrition, turnover, performance evaluation, rewards, promotions, maybe punishment also, learning development, and every single activity conducted by HR professionals relevant to people in any organization can be really guided by analytics and can benefit from people analytics. And fine, if all of these can benefit from analytics and can get some useful insights from analytics, then which activity deserve more attention, or should we just apply analytics to all of these activities? Should we really consider people analytics in every single HR process we have in our organization? Well, the answer is ultimately related to our company's strategy. What is our company's strategy? What is our organization's strategic targets? What are the most relevant targets in our organization? Those are the ones that really deserve most of the attention and most of the investments as well. Because if I'd like to really implement people analytics and generate analytics, that's not it, it's a costly process. It requires expertise. We need people expert in data analysis. It requires also there is cost involved in implementing the necessary technology, the software tools and applications that can be used to really uh, run these analytical models and produce these kind of insights. Data processing software, the hardware necessary to process all of this data. So there's a lot of cost involved. Um, do I really need to incur all of this cost for every and each single process in my organization? Well, the answer is no. Definitely, we need to focus on the strategic targets and the most important aspect of the organization. And for that to be done properly, for that to be accomplished successfully, we need a process in place. We need a process, and we define, we have already the people analytics process that starts ultimately with our business strategy, because the, the purpose of people analytics is to really support our decision making process, and we are making decisions to um, uh, improve certain things in our organization, to make some changes, to ultimately, to eventually increase revenues, to improve our working in line with our strategy. So essentially, we start with our business strategy. And then we look into our business and see whether we have any problems that inhibiting this organization from really accomplishing its strategic targets. If yes, then these are the problems that require the support of analytics. These are the problems that requires involvement of people analytics. So from there, we start looking for relevant data or factors which can be fed into an analytics model that can give me some insights, which I would use to interpret and then finally resolve the problem, make a resolution in the form of some organizational change, maybe changing the policy in the strategy, an introduction of new working units, generating new working teams, new rules. It depends, whatever that works better for my strategy. Let's look into more details into each one of these steps, starting with our business strategy. So, depending on our organization, the type of business we conduct. Okay, okay. So, okay. So, starting with the business strategy, uh, it really depends on our organization. It really depends on what kind of business we conduct. Is this a hospital? Is it a university? Is it are we selling products? So depending on the kind of business we have, depending on the core business activities we conduct, we decide on what are the most important things to our organization, what are the most prevalent targets for our organization. From there, we start looking at possible problems. Do we have any problems in any of these areas, the strategic areas in our organization? So, for example, we have maybe high attrition rate, or maybe we have high turnover, attrition or turnover. We are not able to keep good talents in our organization, which would incur, for example, cost of recruitment. It would incur cost of training new employees. We are losing knowledge, expertise, and knowledge. Frequently, maybe it's affecting our relationship with our clients because they'd like to have long-term relationship. Fine, that would be the problem. How can we address this problem? From there, after identifying the problem, we move into looking at the key data elements, or the most relevant variables that can be relevant to this problem, that can have a significant impact on this problem. Should we use all this data? Some of this data? That's a major question in the process of people analytics process, deciding on what data to use, what data is relevant. Sometimes we can suffice with classical data. Sometimes we really need to generate new data, combining existing data, or maybe looking for different data sources that would give me better insight into the problem in hand, the problem which I am facing. So once we decide on what kind of data will help my model, the amount of data, whether I am going to track data over 1 year, over 2 years, or maybe a few months would suffice, I can move to the next phase of the process and then decide on the analytical model that can better put this data together in order to generate some helpful insight. And here come, and actually this task and the previous one are fundamentally to be done by data analysts or data scientists, because they know better how really to deal with data, how to collect data, and how to transform data if it's not really currently in a way suitable for generating analytics or suitable to be used with a certain analytical model. Um, Talking about analytical models, what are the most commonly models used for people analytics? We have different classes of analytical models. We can classify them into predictive models, clustering models, association and rule-based models, and many other models. Let's have a look at each one of these and understand what we mean by them and how they can really help us in getting some interesting insights concerning people analytics. Starting with the most commonly used one, the predictive classification models. With classification models, as the name suggests, we are aiming to look for some discrete classes or discrete categories. Maybe we are classifying some paths into successful versus not successful. Maybe we are categorizing the employees into some predefined categories, which are not explicitly known for us. Rather, we need really the help of our analytical models to come up with these categories. So how the process goes, we start with collecting some data from our maybe databases, from our ERP systems, or from other sources available for our organization. And then based on some machine learning algorithms, we generate a prediction model. This model later on can be used to predict new data for which we don't know really these category. We don't know ahead of time what are the expected categories in this data. We use this model trained on historical data to infer insights into the data and tell me what are the hidden categories. Another form of analytical models, which is commonly used in people analytics, is clustering model. So what do clustering models do? As the name suggests, and as you can see here in the picture, we start with a huge amount of data that might seem to be homogeneous. It might seem to look similar, but after applying clustering algorithms, some mathematical algorithms, we end up revealing some uh, clusters within this main data. These clusters can tell me which data points are interrelated, which data points are closer to each other than other data points. An example of this, if I would like, for example, to find out some customer segments. I don't know ahead of time maybe I don't know ahead of time my customer segments, or I need to know my um, uh, working groups, the teams, the informal teams within my organization, based on some attributes, based on some similar attributes. We can run clustering algorithms to lead to some interesting clusters, interrelated clusters of workers, of people within the organization, or interrelated clusters of customers, my customers and clients. How would this help me eventually in my analytics process? Usually, this clustering process feeds into the classification. So I might not initially know how many categories are there, what are the existing categories. Do I have three, four, five, six groups of clients or customers? Do I have five different groups, informal groups of my employees? By running these algorithms, I would be able to figure out the existing relationship amongst the entities under investigation, whether I am investigating my employees, my staff, my customers. From there, I can now start looking deep into these clusters and find out what are the relevant attributes. From here, I can, for example, infer some categories or classes which can feed into a classification model in the future that would allow me to do these kind of prediction. How would it help me? It can help me, for example, mapping a customer group to the best research associate in my company, or mapping a group of clients of similar needs and attributes to the best facility management engineer in my company, based on some attributes other than the ones that are usually explicitly defined in our databases. Another type of analytical model is the association rule. Why do we need association rules? Association rules can reveal a lot of interesting patterns. It's, as you can see here in the picture, it tells you X implies Y or so. So if something happens, it would lead to another consequence. This is extremely very important when we define, for example, career paths within the organization. If we aim to generate these paths automatically, to understand what would be the best development path of an employee moving from one role to another role and continue to perform well in all the three roles. Can this be done with a professional and an expert without the help of analytics? Maybe it can, with experience and very efficient evaluation. But with the support of analytics model, we can automate this process, bringing more insight and involving other factors than the ones that are commonly used when we decide on this career path. For example, think so we can maybe discover some mobility options within the organization that we might have not thought of, like moving employee A from role uh, his current or her current role to another role would lead to better, for example, payoffs to our organization because of some indicators that were evaluated by the analytical model. The another form of analytical models, which is also commonly used in the field of people analytics, is the regression model. What do you mean by regression models? Basically, in these models, we try to find out the association between a variable or multiple variables and a desired output. So, for example, I would like to see the association or the correlation between my employees, some attributes about my employees and the sales they make, or some attributes about my employees and the conflicts they make, or I don't know, other kind of attributes, and then the number of accidents they make in the workplace. um, so what are these attributes? What could be these attributes? I decide on them. I can evaluate many different combinations of attributes until I reach at the most influential and the most significant attributes that really correlate to the score and the question, whether I am actually evaluating their sales, their safety, their SLOs. Uh, it, it depends on my organization and the type of business I am conducting. And it depends on what kind of measures are more prevalent to my business, and which scores really represent the performance of my employee. Then I can decide on my regression model to predict in the future, based on some attributes, whether that employee would really make great sales or not. It can give great insight to the hiring process. It can give great insight to the evaluation, to the performance evaluation process. At the moment, I'm just explaining the theory, but in the coming slides, we'll be exploring some working examples from a real life case study, and these concepts will be definitely clearer. Another analytical model which is commonly used in people analytics is network analysis. As you can see here in the picture, we have network of people, and that's typically a social a network extracted from a social media platform, something similar to Facebook maybe, or Twitter, where people can connect with each other easily. They follow an account, or they can be friends with each other. This network analysis concept is not, as I said, very specific to people analytics. It's been there in the field of computer science for a very long time. By looking at these networks, we can infer great insights depending, for example, on the connectivity of an individual node. Like this one is highly connected, it has so many edges connected to it. So apparently it's a kind of a hub. Maybe that's a public figure, an influencer, or whatever we want to call it. What about this one? What about this one? We can actually measure the length of the edges, the number of connections, the strength of the connections. We can apply a lot of measures drawn or derived from graph theory. These are graphs or network theories that would give a valuable insight into our people analytics. Also, we will see today in our in the coming lectures how these can be used to offer great insight into managing collaboration within organizations. Having decided on the right amount and type of data, and then selected the right analytical model that can use this data, now we need to collect some insights, which is really the objective of implementing these analytical models. So now we are collecting the insights. We need at the moment we can, for example, if we've put in place an analytical model to predict whether an employee will do well or not after joining the job, then we can measure these at the moment. We can see like, okay, we've predicted based on some variables, based on some attributes, that if I hire that person, he would really do well in a certain role. We start measuring these insights. Or for example, I'm hiring a salesperson based on some attributes, and based on the model I had implemented, I could predict that he would make these targets, these sale targets. We start um, evaluating these insights. And then, based on these evaluations, I can make resolutions. If the insights turn to be accurate and I manage to validate these insights, and I manage to find out that they are really reflecting, for example, causes of attrition, or causes of turnover, or low performance, for example, then I can decide on a resolution plan. I can decide on changes that would improve the business ongoing. It would improve the way I conduct my business. And that's why we go back to the strategy, because we might need really to make some amendments. We might need to make some changes. We might need to change, for example, the recruitment process. We might need to focus on different qualities that were found to be relevant through the analytics process. We might need to consider, for example, changes in our employees' roles based on this insightful performance evaluation. I might have realized that I'm not putting the people in the right place. I'd rather really change their roles so that they would perform better in their new positions, and I would make sure that this eventually will pay back to my organization. And that's the last process in our people and the last task or activity in our people analytics process. So now let me just have a look at the Q&A. Maybe you've put some questions about the first part. Okay, so Dr. Huda, she's asking how usually we can identify the problems in any organization, especially most of the organization lack updates of their employees. Okay, that's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question, Dr. Huda. Uh, and that accentuate the need really for having a data analyst in place. That's why we need data analysts in the HR team, because if those people are there within the HR team, it is their job really to monitor the changes in data, to put in place the computational models capable of um, um, figuring out these problems as soon as they happen. But let me tackle your question from a different perspective. Now, from a people analytics perspective, if we have models, the proper models put in place with the right people running them, it is very easy to really identify these problems early on. And it is very easy to identify the most relevant factors or attributes, and then come up with insights that would really lead to some solutions. Um, I assume that your question consider a scenario where we don't have this data analyst in place. We don't have this role, not yet. It's not in our HR team. So how can we figure these problems? Unfortunately, we do figure them late. We do figure them late. And then we start investigating possible solutions, and we start looking at following the process. We start following the process, looking at the relevant data and which kind of model to use, and then we put it in place. Once the model is put in place, in the future, immediately similar problems will be identified very quickly. But for the first time occurrence, we cannot anticipate the future. We can't tell. We can't tell. And you will see this in our in few case studies which we are discussing today together. Case studies related to really big companies, very successful companies. They couldn't really first of all identify the existence of a problem until after like 1 or 2 years. And then once they identified the existence of a problem, they didn't know how to solve it. They couldn't tell what are the prevalent factors until they put efficient and effective analytical models that was capable of really figuring out the relevant factors and then addressing those problems. Can you please highlight the name of companies who employ this in the UAE? Do you think Emirates Airline employs these techniques? Well, I to be honest, I don't know names of I don't know names, exact names of companies that employ these, but there exist some companies that really implement data analytics or people analytics in their HR departments. But the examples which we are going to discuss today are international examples. They're not specific to the context of the UAE, but you can relate. You can relate, of course, once we start discussing those case studies. Okay, Mr. Muhammad. Okay, does data analytics in HR mean that we need to have sophisticated software to enable this, please? Or with MS Excel advanced features, if we analyze the data and produce results in meaningful way, would it suffice? And then do data analytics as a concept? Although several IT solutions are available to assist in this regard, please need your expert opinion on this. Okay, thank you for your question, Mr. Muhammad Noorallah. Well, some of the analytical models, the most primitive one, to be honest, the most primitive one, they can be implemented with Excel. But for us to really leverage the benefits, the true value of people analytics and HR analytics in our organization, we need to have those. What you refer to as sophisticated software. We need software systems that implement machine learning algorithms because all the models, the analytical models, which I have just discussed with you, the association rule, the regression model, the prediction model, all of these are machine learning algorithms which are not implemented in Excel. Excel is a what is Excel? We can just do basic statistical analysis, maybe with some extra macros, adding them to Excel. We can do a little bit more advanced statistical analysis, but not machine learning. Not machine learning. We won't be able to find out those interesting patterns which I was referring to. Okay, I will stop with the questions now and continue with our staffing analytics. And maybe that's the most important HR activity because if we don't have employees, then why do we need to manage people? We start by staffing, we start by hiring people, and we aim always to hire the right people. Speaking about the right people, there are many criteria. The right people will be capable of really handling the job activities, will be good team players. They will communicate well with other team members. The right people will stay with us, and that's an extremely very important thing, a very important target for all the organization. You don't want to spend money in recruitment process and then post recruitment training people, and making sure that they now got adjusted to the work environment and they fit well with the work environment, and then suddenly they would just leave the company. So it is very important also to address attrition And to address attrition, sometimes we really need to pay very special attention to internal mobility, moving employee from one position to another, changing roles, promoting them into higher level position to make sure that they are satisfied, and they would continue working with our organization, and they would continue being productive in this organization. So, what aspects of staffing can benefit from people analytics? Basically, everything related to the staffing cycle, starting, as I said, from hiring, and then internal mobility, moving employees from one role to the other, and then addressing attrition and turnover. Let's tackle each one of these. Starting with hiring, which of the following methods of evaluating job candidates is most effective at predicting subsequent performance? We invest a lot in recruiting the right people. We conduct interviews, structured interviews. We sometimes do integrity tests. We sometimes do cognitive ability tests. We can do all of these or some of these depending on the requirements, requirements of our organization. But uh, eventually, can we ensure 100% that after employing a physician, for example, or after employing a salesperson, or after employing an admin assistant or a faculty member, he or she would really meet our expectation as an organization, would really perform as well as we would like him or her to perform? We cannot guarantee 100%. We can never guarantee 100%. Then how can people analytics help me in this place? You can see this interesting correlation model, which was generated based on some regression model, which we have just explored in the previous slide. In one of the organization, what they did, they wanted to really find out what are the most prevalent um, what are the most prevalent, the most important, and the most significant candidate verification and validation techniques. So what they did over a long period of time, they used all of these. They used work samples, cognitive ability tests, structured interviews, job knowledge tests, integrity tests, all of these unstructured interviews to evaluate their candidates during interviews, during the recruitment process, the full recruitment process. And then they tracked their performance for a while after joining the organization. And then they mapped these results. They put things together. They put these variables with the performance measures that are calculated or measured after the employee has already joined the company and started working with the company. And they found a very high correlation between the work samples, for example, and the expected performance. They found that if the employee really, during the recruitment process, provide evidences of work samples, and those work samples were very satisfactory, then more likely that employee would perform well after joining the organization. This regression analysis provided an insight for the hiring process. So now the hiring process has become more informed. They are not just collecting all of these as a part of a systematic process. Rather, they know the value of each one of these validation tools when we evaluate our candidates. For example, they know that the most important thing really to rely on is the work sample. And it would ensure that an employee would really perform well after joining the organization. Another aspect is the internal mobility. If we consider this as our organization, here we have the bottom line and here we have the top management. And it's very common that we might have at any point of time some vacancies inside our organization. for which we might consider really moving employees from one role to another internally. Is this something preferable? Is this something desirable for organizations? Well, many times it is indeed, because the cost of internal mobility is lower than the cost of new hire. Already, our employees, they are familiar with our strategy, with our organizational culture. They know the policies. They know everything. So if I move that person from here to here, um, it would incur less cost. But what if I am moving this employee from this role to a higher role, and then I was surprised that he or she could not really perform well? They could not perform well. Then that would actually incur extra cost on me. It was much better for me to hire a new person, a new employee who would do much better, who would perform much better than this person. How can I evaluate the cost of mobility, and how can I predict the success of this mobility? Can people analytics help with this? Well, it does. If I if I put in place an effective and efficient prediction model, for example, or association rule model, or a career path prediction model, it can guide me in my internal mobility decision. It can guide me, it can tell me whether this employee would work better here than the other employee, or vice versa. It can give me some insights and indicators which might not be easily figured out with the explicit data I have in hand. What is the other important aspect related to staffing that people analytics can help with? It is attrition. And attrition is indeed a major problem for organizations. As I said, we spend time conducting interviews, validating the qualifications of our candidates, and making sure that these are the right candidates, and then we put them in the right place, and then we train them, and then we spend all that time with them. That's a great cost, and then they willingly leave the company for maybe unknown reason. We don't know why they leave the company. If it happens once, if it happens twice, that might be okay. But what if we have an attrition problem in our organization? People are continuously leaving, and we don't know why they are leaving, and we cannot expect. We don't know when they are more likely to leave. We cannot expect this. We cannot predict this. Then that's a major problem. That's a major problem. I might not, referring back to Dr. Huda's question, I might not be able to figure out this problem early enough. I might only realize that I have an attrition problem after like 1 or 2 years. And at that time, I would have incurred significant losses, maybe. But, anyways, late better than never. As soon as we recognize the problem, we can start thinking of suitable analytical models that can be put in place to really identify this problem and then resolve it. And this leads us to our next case study, a real life case study. Attrition problem at Nelson. Nelson is a big data company. It offers customer intelligence research and market research. This is actually what they do. They do analytics. This is their core business. They do analytics. What happened at Nelson? And despite they do analytics, and this is a big data company, one of the most well-known big data company, until 2015, I think they were not doing analytics for their HR. They were not yet implementing analytics model in their HR for their people management. So what happened at Nelson? Considering their most important and most critical strategic targets, it is extremely important for them that they hire intelligent research associates, and they would retain them. They would keep them as long as possible. Why? Because if we go back to the previous slide, what they do consumer intelligence, they do market research. So for them, the relationship between the research associate and the clients who are requesting market research is extremely important, and it's It's preferred to be a long-term relationship. So what if our market researchers or our research associates do not stay long with us? Then maybe our customers would never like really to have to renew maybe their contracts with us, or maybe our clients will follow the research associates they feel comfortable with to the other companies. So does this lead to a major problem? It does. It does. It leads to a very a big problem at Nelson's organization. In 2015, the leader of one of Nelson's biggest business approached one of the company's HR leaders with this question. They said, "Do you know why people are leaving my team? People are leaving. Our research associates are leaving willingly. It's their choice. They were not terminated. Nothing has gone wrong. They are just leaving the company." And this attrition is causing a lot of losses for the company. So they decided to start investigating the problem. They started immediately thinking of what data can be relevant, what data can have most influence or the most significant impact on this problem, what can be related to attrition. And when we start thinking of data, as I said, we can be really immediately overwhelmed because nowadays we have all kind of data. We have huge amount of data. We have huge databases. We have chats, emails, connection, interaction data, all kind of data, log data. So what kind of data should I choose? Where to start? They started with the most basic ones. They started with age, gender, tenure, manager rating, and they continued adding metrics, adding metrics, and fine tuning their data model with the analytical model so that they would come up with the most influential factors really relevant to attrition. Now, at this point, they started thinking of the most suitable analytical model. Are we using a network analysis? Are we using prediction? Are we using regression? Are we using clustering? Well, for them, because they would like really to find out the most relevant factors, the most relevant variables to attrition. At first, they needed to come up with a formula or a model that would really estimate the cost of attrition. The cost of attrition. What I mean, the cost is our incurred loss. How much are we losing at every attrition point? So they come up with this very simple equation, multiplying the number of associates, excuse me, for every 1 point of attrition times the average salary by level times the weighted based on tenure and level. This formula would give us the score which we are looking for in a regression model, trying to associate the most relevant factors with the problem of attrition. Sorry, just 1 second. Okay. Okay, so they've put this into their model, the formula used to calculate the cost of attrition at a single point of time. And they started fine-tuning the model. By fine-tuning, we mean trying different combination of data, trying different combinations of variables or attributes that we think could be relevant or associated with the problem under question. So starting with the 20 preliminary variable, they continued adding more and more until they reached like 150 variables, and they are still improving. What kind of insights they got out of this model? It revealed something extremely very helpful. They realized that indeed the first year matters the most. If they can keep their associates for 1 year, the likelihood that they would stay with them is very high. If they can't keep them for the first year, the likelihood that they would leave the company is also very high. What else? We found that gender, ethnicity do not play a role, and this was revealed through the regression model based on the regression analysis. Also, they found that getting promoted, it's more likely encouraging employees to stay with the company, reducing chances of attrition. All of these act as variables in our regression model. Evaluated by what? Evaluated by this formula. This is our score against which we are evaluating the impact of these variables. So, how did they use these insights? What kind of change did they make? They introduced something that they call it ready to move team. They introduced a new team in the company. What is the job of this team? The job of this team is really to be very close with people in their first year, because they realize that the first year is the most significant, the most critical, and people, if they can't make it to their first performance evaluation, more likely they are leaving the company. They are indeed going to leave the company. So what happened, based on this a predictive model, based on this analytical model, they could identify people who the flight risk people who are more likely to leave the company within 6 months of joining this company. And then this team, the ready to move team, they would meet with those associates, talk to them, and see what the problem is, and suggest for them a move inside the company. Did this really reduce the problem? Interestingly, it reduced the problem by 48%, a percentage that's not negligible at all, a very big percentage. So, did analytics help Nelson to really address the attrition problem? It did, big time indeed. What about the other interesting? The okay, and there are some extra questions here. Okay, okay. So I have a question from Mr. Romel. My question is, how do you view the analytic model in place to operate in the areas of staffing and training? Are there specific standard tools being used in industry today? Um, Romel, I hope I answered your question. Maybe you asked your question before starting the staffing section. So now you have an idea how analytics can really help staffing by providing insights on from the very early phase or the very first process of staffing. It provides insights on whether a candidate would perform well in our organization after joining it or not, based on some variables that can be put in a prediction model or a regression model that would give a score. This score, it tells whether that person is more likely to succeed in his or her job or not. And we do have these in place. Um, in terms of training, there are in some analytics concerning training. It tells you, for example, what are the chances that if an employee, for example, attends one, two, or three trainings or certain kind of training, what are the chances that he or she would have better performance? What are the chances that he or she would be, for example, qualified to move to a higher position or to a different role in the organization? All of these are doable with analytics model. We can predict all of these with analytics model. If we decide on the most suitable data points, on the most relevant variables, that's the starting point. That's a key success factor. Initially, I need to decide what variables to use in my data. And as you saw with the Nelson's case study, they started with 20 attributes, 20 variables, the most classical one, the most common one. But over time, in order to really fine tune their model and find out most accurate predictions, they ended up to the point where they published their case study, they ended up with 150 variables. And by the way, not all of these variables can be explicitly available. Sometimes we really need to calculate to generate variables. Some variables can be like an aggregation of some other existing variables, or we can introduce new variables to describe the performance or the qualification of our employees. And we will see this in our next case study related to performance analytics. Okay. Mm. That's another interesting question. Wouldn't the 360 evaluation that gets sent out to staff and performance reviews help in these analytics regarding employees? It does help. It does help. We can diversify the sources of our data. We can use data from our databases, or we can add data from assessments, or we can add data from evaluation. We can introduce different types of evaluation, psychometric analysis test, for example, um, or maybe we can in some cases, by the way, analytics can really go far concerning what type of data to be used. We can use email data in some way. We can use nowadays, because at the moment we are working online. Most of us are working online, and we are heavily using for example, applications like Teams or Zoom to conduct online meetings, to communicate with collaborators and team members. So what we can do also, we can actually get the log data of these applications, and this is done in the field of analytics. We can collect the interaction data, how often people interact with each other, who are the people who receive most of the interactions in our organization, what type of interaction. Sometimes in the chats we put likes and smiley faces and these kind of things. In some type of analytics, these are being tracked for some to give some kind of insights. Maybe we can give some hints about this when we come to the mental health analytics section, the last section of today's lecture. Is there a concrete way to predict whether a candidate will be suitable for a certain position with limited data on them before employing them? You said it yourself, limited data. If you have limited data, then how can we have insight? How can we have, unless this limited data is the most relevant data? In that case, then yeah, we can have a concrete way. We can have a prediction model that utilize this data to predict ahead of time whether an employee will be doing well in the organization or not, will be working well or not, if this limited data is the most influential, the most significant data. But if the limited data is not really the most significant data, then we cannot ensure that our predictions or our classifications would really provide that kind of information, would inform really the hiring decision. I think now I can proceed with the next section because we are running tight in time. So we are done with staffing. We've hired people, and hopefully we've choose the right people, and we've put them in the right place, and we've given them the right salaries based on experience, as well as with the support of analytics. So now we need to evaluate their performance. We need to evaluate the performance of our employees. So, what aspects of performance evaluation can benefit from people analytics? Basically, everything. We can utilize analytics to inform our rewarding strategy. We can utilize analytics to identify areas of possible improvements through the evaluation process, and that's extremely very prevalent when using analytics, because as I highlighted at the beginning of the lecture, many times when we do classical evaluation and classical assessment, looking at discrete instances or discrete events, even if we are tracking these over a long period of time, if we're not really generating patterns, we might not be able to really provide the proper evaluation. We might be influenced by noisy data. It's very common. So if I'm looking at, for example, if I'm evaluating the performance of my salesperson at the end of the year, and for some reason I do have some noisy data in the performance of that employee, he or she would turn up to have an excellent performance because they've made excellent targets. But it can be an incident of luck, chance, or this can be a noisy data. This cannot happen if I am utilizing analytics, because analytics does not look at these discrete incidents or isolated events. Rather, it aggregates the data in a meaningful way to generate consistent patterns, consistent recurring patterns. So if really that salesperson is a great salesperson, I would be able to see this pattern through the analytics. Otherwise, it won't be able to generate a pattern of success. Can I use analytics to guide my punishment disciplinary action? Yes, we can. So basically, people analytics can guide all aspects of performance evaluation. Let's have a look at a working example and consider the Zimbabwe taxi company. What happened with this company? They were having high accident rates. Their taxi drivers, they were making a lot of accidents, and we can tell a lot of disadvantages, a lot of problems associated with accidents. The maintenance cost, for example, safety of the travelers, the image of the company, problems with the insurance, for example. So there are a lot of losses incurred. What is their strategic priority? Definitely, it's safety. They would like to offer safe and pleasant taxi trips. And therefore, they always aim to reduce accidents. But what happened? They had a lot of accidents, which caused a problem. So, how can they address this problem? How can they find out the best taxi driver? Um, Based on classical evaluations that focus on the age, for example, that focus on the years of service, the experience, they could find that, for example, 52% of the accidents were generated by people with less than 5 years of experience. With drivers that have low experience, or with young drivers, they make the majority of the accidents. But this cannot really guide a well-informed decision. So they wanted to have a more insightful and more practical analytical model. What they did, they looked at different types of attributes beyond the classical attributes, not just focusing on age, years of experience, qualification, driving certificate, license, and these kind of things. They started to investigate the possibility of using psychometric analysis test. They said maybe also the personality of the driver is related to the number of accidents he or she makes. And this is also related to one of the questions that were raised up here, limited data. Again, if we are only relying on the psychometric analysis test, and as we are going to see now, that it turned to be extremely relevant and extremely influential, then maybe this will suffice. If our limited data is only collected from psychometric analysis test, then maybe, yeah, we can predict whether we are hiring the right taxi driver or not. The right taxi driver. But if my limited data does not have all the necessary variables, all the necessary attributes, then maybe my model will not be able to give me the right insight which I'm looking for. What does this fitness to drive psychometric test cover? It covers some dimensions, a psychological dimension related to concentration, reactive stress tolerance, peripheral perception, and few others. And then they implemented a logistic regression model, which we've learned in the previous slides, that for logistic regression model, we try to find the association between number of variables and a score, a target score. In this problem, our target score is the number of accidents. We want to reduce the number of accidents and see which dimensions of this, the psychometric analysis test, are more relevant to the number of accidents, are strongly associated with the number of accidents. If we look at the results here of the regression analysis, they found that concentration and stress tolerance uh, are the most significant attributes, as they have the lowest p-value here. We can see if you compare the p-values of all the dimensions of the psychometric analysis test, these two dimensions, they have the lowest p-value, which means that these are the most significant ones, influencing really the number of accidents incurred or committed by different drivers. They built this model and they trained it on a number of um, they collected the data of number of drivers over 1 year between 2013 and 2015, and they trained the model so that based on the psychometric analysis attributes, the dimensions defined in psychometric analysis test, they would be able to predict and they would be able to evaluate the performance of the taxi driver, whether that taxi driver is a good taxi driver or not, based on their score on the psychometric analysis test. This is it, at the end, this turned to be not only very helpful in performance evaluation, but also it adds value or it helps in the hiring phase. So when we hire new taxi drivers, we can actually have them do this kind of psychometric analysis test and run this model, which was validated and verified with our drivers, with the company's driver over 1 year. So we know for sure that it's valid and it can give reliable predictions. So now we can use it for the hiring to inform the hiring process and find out whether a taxi driver would be a good taxi driver or not ahead of time before joining the organization. We can set, for example, standards. We can set thresholds. Like I would accept this score on the psychometric analysis test. I cannot accept below this score because based on my prediction, based on my logistic regression model, it's been proved over time that people with a score lower than this number, they are more likely to make more accidents and they will cause a lot of losses for the company. So this analytical model, it didn't only add value to the performance evaluation process, but also it also add value to the hiring process. And let's move to the collaboration quickly. Speaking about collaboration, we are concerned with internal collaboration inside the organization, how well our employees communicate and collaborate with each other. Why is this important? It is vital, of course. If we don't have our employees collaborate well with each other, there could be some delays in different business transaction. We can end up having conflicts. We can end up having isolated people that do not receive the necessary support. We can end up having people who are overwhelmed. The best collaborators, all of the employees go to one person or two persons in the organization, they end up feeling overloaded. So how can we really create healthy and balanced collaboration network within our organization? There is a very important concept that we learn from people analytics or HR analytics that can guide the formation of good networks, collaboration networks inside the organization. It is related to organizational network analysis, ONA. What is ONA? If we look, for example, here at the typical formal organizational chart, we have the manager and then the mid-manager and then the people working under them. It just tells you who reports to whom, depending on their positions and roles in the organization. It doesn't tell much about how well they collaborate with each other or how often they communicate with each other. It doesn't say anything about this. If we convert this organizational chart into a networking chart, based on the frequency of communication, how frequently they communicate with each other, and who are the number of collaborators with each employee in the company, I can have a better understanding of the collaboration inside my organization. I can see that, for example, Noura here, she's a focal point. That's Despite, if you come and look at Noura here, she's not the manager, she's not a med manager, but she's a focal point. She has a large number of collaborators. In terms of network concepts, she's a hub. It has a lot of many different connections. Mitch is also another hub, has many connections. That person, Ilyas, is maybe isolated, and I can go beyond this analysis. I can do much more. I can identify the people who I really need to involve in different teams. They can make good team players. I can identify people who are isolated. They are not well connected in the organization. Maybe they are not adjusting well. Maybe these are new joiners. They need a while to adjust well in the organization. So by considering these kind of organizational network or graphs, we can have better insight into our collaboration, how collaboration is taking place in the organization. This is a very small case study about a major petroleum organization. They were facing a problem. What is the problem? They were facing strange delays in their orders, which resulted in losses in millions. They incurred a lot of losses, and they didn't know what were the major causes of these losses until they decided to make these kind of network structure analysis or organizational network analysis. So they started with hierarchical structure, and that's only a subset of the main hierarchical structure. It's a very big organization, but because the problem was relevant to the production team, we are focusing on the part related to the production team. And they converted this based on the frequency of communication and the frequency of collaboration into a network diagram, this diagram. By converting this classical hierarchical structure into a network diagram, we can see things from a completely different perspective. Mitchell, for example, here, we can't tell really whether he is playing a significant role as a collaborator in the company or not. But if we look at Mitchell inside this network structure, he is playing a central role. Mitchell is actually the only person connecting the production team, this team, okay, with everybody else in the organization. And the production team seems to be kind of isolated, being only connected through Mitchell to everybody else. They are indeed isolated, and that's a very important team in the organization, which explains really the delay um, uh, in their work, all kind of processes, which resulted in the major losses by this major petroleum organization. What had happened 2 years ago? What the company did, they changed physically the location of this team. They've put them on a new floor by themselves, assuming that if they have their own workspaces, they would be collaborating better, they would be focusing better on their work. But what happened, being put in a physically a different place, distant from everybody else in the company, they got also disconnected, which resulted in those undesirable delays, which resulted in those losses. So, by analyzing this network structure, we can reveal many interesting information about how collaboration is taking place in our organization. If you look at this person, for example, here, he seemed to be extremely isolated. Extremely isolated. This could be a newcomer, maybe a new joiner in the company. So we would really design some maybe practices that allow for easier um, uh, collaboration, or for induction of the new joiners so that they would blend in faster into our organization, to have them quickly joining the business activity without being that isolated. That was about performance analytics. I don't know if we have time to cover the last part, and we still have a lot of questions here. I will have a look at these questions. Okay, so you think data analyst role mostly is suitable for companies which have large number of employees, but for smaller companies, specialist, generalist can handle. Yes, I agree with you as well. Because the data analyst, they will be working with large amount of data, addressing big problems. So most of the time, this role is more relevant to really big companies. What analytics model is best used for qualitative data, most specifically if we are dealing with behaviors in an organization? That's an excellent question. But I would like to ask you another question. What kind of behavior you are referring to? Because collaboration, for example, is a behavior. That's a type, a form of behavior in the organization. So if we are considering collaboration habits or collaboration behavior, the network analysis would do well. If you are considering other kind of behaviors with other kind of qualitative data, for example, things relevant to personality, the characters of our employees, their attitudes, these kind of things, then we can use logistic regression, we can use classification, any of the models, any of the models, depending on what exactly you are trying to address. So first we start by identifying the problem. What is the problem? What is the objective of the model? Am I trying to find out the association, for example, between these qualitative data and a certain target? Then in that case, a logistic regression can do, it can work. Am I trying to, for example, classify? Am I trying to find uh, um, for example, without a predefined target? I don't have a predefined target. I don't have a formula for cost or for performance or accident. I don't have a specific target, but I would like to find out some kind of associations or relationships within my organization. Then clustering can help in that case. Clustering can provide a lot of interesting insight. And then within these clusters, I can start dig deep and find out what are the most relevant attributes within this group or within this group. Sometimes I can use association rules, for example, if I don't have, again, a predefined target or a predefined score. So it depends what you need to do with these analytics. Then you can decide on the most appropriate model. Okay, Dr. Huda, where are people analytics efforts most frequently focused? On the most prevalent aspect to your company, on the most important process to your company, and also in the area where you are facing problems, because in the areas where you have problems, these really require the prompt action, prompt attention. So if you are facing problem, not able to hire the most suitable people, or not able to find out or identify the most relevant qualities in your candidates, then in this case, people analytics would help you the most in the hiring phase. For example, if you are doing well with hiring, if you are doing well with keeping your employees, but you're not able, for example, to form active collaboration groups within the organization, then maybe it will help you in that regard. It depends on which area in your organization requires analytics. And uh, just to emphasize one thing, if we are doing something for performance evaluation, it doesn't mean that it works only for performance evaluation. It can inform other processes as well. So, just like the example of the taxi drivers, they started actually this logistic regression model with the psychometric analysis test to evaluate their current employees, to evaluate the performance of their taxi drivers. They thought like they were not doing proper evaluation of performance, because even with the existing performance evaluation, the drivers would still make accidents, and those accidents were really very high in frequency. So they designed the model to address the performance evaluation process, but eventually it also informed the hiring. They used it for the hiring process. So these models, these analytical models, they can serve many different functions at the same time. Um, okay. Can we consider monkey surveys an acceptable methodology to collect data and build on it for performance reviews? You can consider it as a suitable data collection technique, but are you going to collect the right data or not? This is the important question. Well, it depends on what kind of questions you will use in SurveyMonkey. It depends on what qualities you will address in those questionnaires that you develop using SurveyMonkey. So indeed, whether a collection tool is a good tool or not, it depends on the data you get from this tool. You can use any tool. You can use any survey tool, any questionnaire tool. It's up to you. You can do it manually. But eventually, we are looking for the most significant variables, the most significant factors. So the questions we use, the way we design our surveys is what's important indeed. Um, is it easy to deal with 120 variable in regression model? Yeah, it is very easy, super easy, because the regression model will be implemented using advanced software system, and these software systems, they are very sophisticated. They can deal with highly dimensional data, with 1000 variables, with 2000 variables. Easy, it's very easy. And it can also helps you find out which are the most significant ones, so that you would factor out the irrelevant factors. So if we start with 120, for example, maybe not all of them are significant. So we will end up maybe with 90 or 80 or 70, depending on the results we get from our regression model. How do we evaluate non-measurable jobs that fall under admin departments? There has to be some qualities which we can measure. We decide on how to measure these qualities through different mechanisms, and data scientists are very expert in designing measuring tools for different types of variables, and deciding actually on what variables to use. You might not think of some factors as relevant variables, but these can be suggested by data scientists because they are expert in identifying the most prevalent variables, how to collect them, how to measure them, and how to use them with analytical models. I will continue with our next section, and I will also try my best to address all of the questions. So far we've covered three activities that are commonly carried by HR professionals, by HR executives, higher staffing, uh, all processes involved in staffing, starting with hiring, internal mobility, and then maybe addressing attrition. We looked at performance evaluation. We looked at team forming and collaboration within the organization. What is our next section? Our next section is a very interesting section, and personally, it's a very dear section to me. It's well-being analytics. And this is my area of research, by the way. Thinking about well-being analytics, many people appreciate the importance of well-being and people's well-being, employees' well-being. But is it really put in action? Are we really doing effective well-being analytics? Survey results show some shocking results. Let me take you through some survey results here. In mental health a survey, they found that 84% of employees, 84% of employees have experienced physical, psychological, or behavioral symptoms of poor mental health where work was a contributing factor. That's a very serious figure, and that's a very serious fact. So, does work contribute to employees' mental health? Definitely, it does. Definitely, it does. People can be either happy with their job, they can be happy with their work environment, working with their colleagues, or they can be unhappy. Then why should we care about this? Why is this something extremely very important? We said at the beginning of the presentation, we said that our employees are our most important asset. Our organization is not good without our employees. We cannot do well if we don't have great employees working with us, staying with us, and doing great job. So how can people do great job if they are not happy, if they are overstressed, if they are depressed, if they don't feel appreciated, if they are overloaded continuously and always with work duties? Definitely they cannot. Definitely they cannot. And therefore, mental health analytics are extremely very important, because they are related with absence rate, they are related to how creative our employees are. Happy employees, they are more likely to think more openly and come up with creative ideas. If we have happy employees, it's less likely that there will be workplace conflicts. They would be able to deal with each other more effectively and smoothly. If they are happy with our organization, they are more likely to stay. So we have loyal employees. We don't have to face attrition or deal with attrition and turnover, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of advantages associated with having our employees feeling happy and caring about our employees' mental health. I've put for you here some interesting statistics which you can go through, because I've already uploaded the slides on the training website. But let's have a look at this example. What is this? Someone would come and ask a question like, how can we really predict employees' mental health status? How can we tell? People refrain speaking about these kind of things. So we cannot adopt the approach of speak out, tell us how you feel. They won't tell us anything. um, it's not easy, and in the middle of our duties and work activities, to really pay dedicated attention to people suffering from or experiencing some mental health challenges. So if we have computer systems doing this on our behalf, it would be really great. And we do have these computer system. Someone would come and ask, what kind of data can I use? Some of the most important data that can help us predict mental health status is attendance data, as well as the communication data, the email data, the chat data, the interaction data, how active and interactive our employees are. Usually people with experiencing mental health challenges, be they would communicate less. From their language, their messages, they would show some level of maybe stress, not feeling comfortable, maybe anxious, maybe uh, depressed, and so on and so forth. Are we going to do this kind of diagnosis for our employees? We won't do it manually, but the analytics model can predict. The analytics model can scan and predict and fires some alarms telling us like, okay, this employee is going through a difficult mental health situation. They are experiencing stress. They are experiencing anxiety. They are overloaded. They are, I don't know, any kind of indicators which require some extra attention. From there, we can take action. We can really address those employees and find out what's going on with them. Maybe looking at maybe their workload is not balanced. Maybe they need special kind of attention. This is an interesting example, the Hitachi Listia AI system. It's a stress prediction system developed by Hitachi, and it can be used by many organizations. Based on this data, they can, by utilizing some machine learning algorithms, predict people with high stress level in the organization, who require some extra attention and some support. I can share also the links for this case study so that you can read more about it. Here are some recommended readings. And that was it for today. I think I can address a few more questions if you've put more questions in the chat. And then we can address the other questions later on. Maybe it can be posted on our website for your reference. No, so let's say we gathered enough data about each candidate or a well driven employee? Do we focus on how much they can achieve or feel to answer the business question, or just gather the needed data to understand if they can answer our business needs and questions? Because at the end of the day, there will be always some conflicts, and especially with HR nowadays in 2020, we care about business more than people, because as you say, we can do most of the things online, so we need the skill. Well, I'm sorry, Miss Nov, I disagree with you, and this actually conflicts with our last section of the presentation. We care about business indeed, but we do care about our people more, because our people are the people who really run this business. They are really running the core business activities. So if our people are not doing well, then how can we be happy with our business? How can we continue with our business? How can we achieve targets? So no, the starting point is, yes, the problem itself. We start with the problem, and we need to address this problem. We collect data relevant to this problem through the employees. Either they provide it explicitly, or we can infer it implicitly from many different sources in the organization, through the communication channels, through the ERP systems, through the log files, for example, the tracking files. We have access to all the data sources in our organization. We can create new data sources by designing questionnaires and surveys and assessments that suits our analytical model, so that we can collect this data that can lead to good insights. Another question, how can you get the data to know who is in contact with who? Is it with sent email, for example, or phone calls, or something else? That's a good question. Actually, we can do it through all of these. We can do it through all of these. And we can do it explicitly. We can find out the collaborators with a small questionnaire asking the employees who's the person you interact with the most. Or we can track email communication, the sender and recipients, and find out the hubs and authorities in this network graph. Or we can track the chat, because now we are working online, and we are using these video conferencing systems, and we chat with our employees. So it's extremely very easy from the log files to find out the collaborators and the hub points, the people who receive most of the communication messages, most of the chat, most of the emails, and the direction, also the flow of data through these networks. From there, once we depict this communication into a graph, we can start our analysis, identifying the key persons in the organization, the isolated persons, or the isolated even groups, not just persons. How do you conduct network analysis? I think I've explained it already in the collaboration section. I give at least some hints and examples of what kind of information we can collect from a network, organizational network diagram. The certificate, I think my colleague Omar can guide you with this. Can you please name the software used for such regression? We have many different software systems. It's not just one software. Many software systems that can be used to conduct regression analysis. If you would like to do it yourself, if you'd like to experiment with this, just to see, like you have some data already, you have your employees' data identified across some dimensions, some attributes or variables in an Excel sheet, for example, and you would like to experiment with this data by yourself, you can use Weka. I'll type it here in the chat. It has a visual user interface, very easy to use. How can I put it in? Or maybe Omar, can you put it in the chat? Weka, Weka. You can download Weka and experiment with it. You can import your data from an Excel sheet, just put it in a CSV format into Weka, and you can start all kind of analysis. You can do classification, regression, and see what you can get. Maybe you would like to see it practically yourself. I hope all companies in the UAE values their people as their assets. Well, I think they do. We are very lucky here in the UAE because the organizations indeed they care a lot about their employees. Okay, you are welcome. Okay, answering that
I think there
question.
is so many questions.
Who's this, Omar? Are you speaking?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, I am. I will be done with, I think, three more questions because most of the remaining comments are thanks and like this. They are just comments, not questions. Okay. How can we know that the results are efficient, and how to determine if those answers are honest in terms of, yeah, here comes the importance of the validation part. So once we get these predictions or classifications or clusters, we validate them. We have the data analyst validating them with actual data. We can have some actual historical data in our company so that we can validate these data. And most of the remaining questions are thanks, comments. If we wish to dive deeper on this subject, okay. Yes, I will type in the chat the name of the tool. It's Weka, Weka. You can download it. It's available for free. It has, as I said, a very easy to use graphical user interface, and you will find a lot of easy to follow YouTube tutorials in case you would like to test with some data that you have already for your organization. We are done. We are done with the questions. Thanks a lot for your attendance. And thanks a lot for your comments and interaction. It was a pleasure to give this presentation to you. Concerning the certificates, I think my colleague Amr will be able to guide you through the process.
Yeah, the
Amr?
certificate. Thank you, doctor, for the valuable lecture. There is the certificate. You will all the participants they will receive it automatically to their email registered with us, which being
Okay.
registered community.edu.ac.ae. The link we have sent earlier in the beginning of the lecture. Yes, doctor, and also just remember you will still continue have the discussion also on the online portal when you log into the community.edu.ac.ae. Just you
Okay.
can join the portal there. You can get the learning material. Also, you can continue your discussion also with the doctor, Dr.
Okay.
Hiba.
Okay, so if you have any questions, extra questions, you can put it on the portal as Amr suggested, right? They can add more questions there, right?
Yes,
Okay,
there's
perfect.
a place where you can continue the discussion.
Okay.
Anything you would like to conclude with Dr. Hiba?
From my side, I'm done. Just many thanks for our attendees. Thanks for joining our presentation, and good luck. That's all.
Thank you, Doctor. And have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you for
Have a nice evening.
joining us today, and hopefully to see you with the next webinar. Thank you.
Inshallah.